I feel like a lot of times when God has a big assignment, there's big adversity that comes. So I'm a big believer that a lot of times our blessing is already existing in the spirit realm. So if you read the book of Daniel, one of the angels of the Lord comes to visit Daniel and says, hey, I would have come to you sooner when you prayed, but I was resisted by the prince of the power of the air, right? So we know that even though Daniel prayed, that the angel was resisted by the spiritual forces that were fighting against him. So which means when Daniel prayed, his answer was already existing in the spirit realm before it came to him in the natural. So I feel a lot of times the enemy can already see our blessing coming. So he throws whatever things in our path to detour us from what God has for us. But at the end of the day, we know that God's purpose will always prevail. Yes. And so you went through if we look at the story of Joseph in the Bible, you went through your pit experience. Right. But then God took you through a process. So I believe there's 3 phases. There's the pit, there's the process, and then there's the position. Take me through what it was like after coming out of the pit. What was that process that you went through to get you to where you are today?
So definitely, when I was brought out of this situation, I would start off as an employee, right? And I would work for my cousin, and I started in the office, but eventually I would end up in the operational kind of side of the scrap metal industry. And just to give you a little bit of context to that, it's a lot of heavy lifting, it's driving equipment, it's knowing how to torch stuff that I've never done in my life. But I was so willing, right? So I believe in the first phase, I was learning. It was a lot of character development, right? And also planting seeds, right? I remember one time my cousin would come up to me. He would ask me, why do you work so hard? Why is it that you're so loyal to me? And I said, because I believe one day God is going to put me in a position like the one you have. And I want to be able to reap that which I sowed, right? And I think I always had a vision. I always had clear goals. I always knew that although it seemed very dark, right? It was only a period of transition, a period of learning, and eventually God was going to take me to a place, like what you said, Joseph, a place of influence, where now I can do things that are in the heart of God, which I promised to him in my darkest moment of life, right?
And I think that's so key, because you understood and you had vision. And I think a lot of times people lack vision. And so you stay with the mundane because you don't have a vision for anything better. When we look at across sectors, if we look at, let's say, San Bernardino County for, out of concern for that area, what they have there is not an unemployment problem as much as it is an underemployment problem. And you and I have talked about this before. But it's a mindset thing. So you can have people that have a job, but they stay stuck in that job. There's no advancement. There's no desire for more. There's no vision to have excellence or to grow out of the situation that they're in. They want to stay stuck in that. What for you was kind of the difference that made you want to strive for more?
Awesome. So I believe it's being exposed to opportunities, being exposed to also God, right? Knowing that whatever I lack, He can fulfill.
Yeah.
So my deep conviction in my faith, I believe, actually pushed me to have vision, right? And being exposed to my cousin, knowing that he's an ordinary person, but that also has a strong faith and a strong relationship with God, and that's what made him successful. So I said, if I do what he's doing here and there, then at the end result will be the same thing, right?
Yeah. At what point, like how many years into it were you when you really had that strong sense that you wanted to do this for yourself?
You know what? It was a couple months. Because I grew up in the scrap metal industry, but more on the peddler side. My dad used to go around picking up scrap. Eventually, he would start doing more of the industrial and the manufacturing, right? But I grew up in all of this. So I had that kind of partnership there waiting for me to just understand the administrative portion, the legality of things, the financial stuff, and for me to have a network in order for us to launch off and actually do the same thing. So I think being exposed was also key.
And I think also God gave you a vision of what you could eventually become, right? And for you, how do you go about building a team of people now under you? Because you served someone and then God elevated you. So now how do you create that culture in your business where you have people that are able to attach to the vision but support you in what God has called you to do?
I think one of the things that I felt I was led by God was to first create a core team, right? This core team must have our core values, right? We tithe. You gotta. I mean, we're not gonna get nowhere if we don't tithe, right? So you gotta tithe. You gotta believe in God, right? And you gotta serve, right? And you gotta identify yourself with the end purpose, and our end purpose is for the kingdom of God to be in a better position after we walk, whether it's the church, whether it's the streets of such nation or a community. As long as you have that, then now we're able to build and kind of fit people in various places, like a foreman or a forklift operator or somebody who's going to do a contract work at one of our real estate properties, whatever it is.
That's really key because I think you're creating a culture that supports the vision that God gave you. But there's a difference between someone, because I think right now everyone thinks like entrepreneur is a very sexy word, right? Everyone wants to be an entrepreneur. And to me, you better be called and know that you're supposed to be an entrepreneur, because a lot of times what people think is a desire for entrepreneurship is actually them not wanting to have someone tell them what to do. And they will do that across every spectrum of their life. They don't want to submit in church. They don't want to submit to God. They don't want to submit to their spouse. They don't want to submit to their parents. And it comes from that attitude of, I don't want anyone telling me what to do. Therefore, I'm going to become an entrepreneur. And that's really not what true entrepreneurship is. It's understanding that you have a vision,
Right.
and it's executing a vision, and it's understanding your assignment.
Yeah, so I believe, like what you said, it comes down to your vision. And at the end of the day, you are an employee. You're an employee to that vision. And many times I find myself being an employee of my employees because their idea is better. You see, but when your vision is what you want to actually make sure that gets developed and fulfilled, then you're willing to die to your pride and take that which is a better decision. And also to add to the entrepreneurial kind of trending, one of the things that I've learned is to focus more on the journey rather than the glamour, right? Because what we get on social media all day long is the glamour. You get
Everybody's a winner on social media.
Everybody's a star, a celebrity.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I think entrepreneurs are the hardest working individuals, true entrepreneurs, right? Especially on the first phase when you're creating. When you're creating is the most difficult part.
An example comes to mind. My wife and I, we were doing some landscaping at our yard. So we had gone to Moon Valley Nursery out here in Chino and looking for some plants. So the guy was taking us through the plants, and they had these olive trees there. And so one of these olive trees clearly had olives on it, but it said non-fruit bearing tree. So then I asked the guy, and I was like, dude, I think you guys have the wrong label on this. It says non-fruit bearing, but there's clearly olives. And he's like, look what's next to it. And it was a fruit bearing olive tree. Wow. So what he said is the bees from the fruit bearing olive tree, they bring the pollen from the fruit bearing one and take it to the non-fruit bearing one. And as long as they're in proximity, the non-fruit bearing olive tree will still bear fruit. But he said once you take it home and plant it in the ground and it's on its own, it will go back to what's already built into it. And so a lot of times I think we build them into our infrastructure, our network, in our companies. And you have to really understand, is your role to support the vision, or did God really give you a vision to go out on your own? And we've seen this with sometimes where you'll see a pastor who's an assistant pastor at a church feels they're called to go out and start their own church, but then goes and does it and then fails miserably because that wasn't the calling. Or someone that works underneath a company and thinks, I'm going to go start my own company. They go off and then they don't bear fruit. And as long as they were where they were supposed to be, they bore fruit. But when they go outside of God's vision for their life, they're going to go back to what they really were and not bear that fruit. And so I think for you, seeing what you were able to accomplish, it's clearly evident that you were called to go on this journey alone and for God to forge this path for you to have this vision for the company you wanted to create the core team, create the company culture. And it's nothing negative about where you came from, but it's that God had a different plan and vision for your life. And so how do you kind of groom that type of behavior in the employees that you have? You talked about creating the core team, but what are some things that you do that your employees feel like they're a part of your vision?
So again, it starts with our core team. The number one thing we want to do is make sure that they're well taken care of. So 3 things we believe is them having a good job. Then we try creating, like what you said, a business opportunity or maybe even a side hustle within our company. And then lastly, we position them so they can acquire real estate. Because we believe if you have a good job, a business and or side hustle, and a piece of real estate, eventually you're bound to succeed financially no matter what, if you're a good steward, right? So that's one of the ways we take care of them so that they can take care of whoever is underneath them, right? And it falls back to our core values, right? Is whatever you sow, you're gonna reap, And at the end of the day, we can't tithe off of something that is unjust. That's right. So that's also part of our core value, right? So those are kind of ideas and things that we've implemented that I believe God has given us to continue to be able to grow, right, and succeed and maintain a team and retain them. Right?
Fantastic. And now as you've seen the company grow and you guys obviously started getting into philanthropic works, can you kind of talk about that part of the vision of your company?
Yes. So we started with the scrap metal. We started doing scrap metal. Eventually we grew. And then with the money that we were making, we started investing into real estate. And eventually, with all the demand that we had for administrative work, we opened up an outsourcing company in the nation of Guatemala. And that enabled us to have physical presence there, right? Have our own people there full time. So what that led us to was to be able to explore opportunities, right, for the last couple of years and what we can actually do in the nation of Guatemala. And this year, we officially adopted the nation of Guatemala. In January, we're going to start a hub. And in this place, we're going to be able to educate people. We're going to be able to feed children. There's going to be a rehab home. We're going to teach about mental health and all that stuff and have a more tangible place where we can kind of distribute from there to the whole nation. On top of that, Cornerstone of Hope, we do a annual Bless a Nation. This year we were in the nation of Kenya, and we were able to bless orphans. We were able to be at multiple churches. We did a crusade. And out of this event, we partnered with one of the bishops there. And next year, we will build an orphanage in the nation of Kenya.
Wow. How does that fuel you to be even that much more successful in your business?
Yeah, you know what? It definitely drives me, right? I think a couple years ago, before we had kind of defined what Cornerstone of Hope was and what it entailed and what it actually required, even financially, right? I was in all of our businesses, I was on first gear, if I can say, everything was running, no major growth, right? But when I started seeing what God was actually giving us, right, in regards to our assignment with Cornerstone of Hope, I said, man, we need so much money. that we definitely had to go back to each company within its own industry and say, how can we grow? How can we create more money? How can we fundraise more so that we can feed this, which is Cornerstone of Hope? So in the last maybe 6 to 8 months, we've been pushing and just working so that we can create and be able to fulfill that task that God has given us.
Fantastic. I get excited because seeing what you're able to do and seeing all the things you're involved in is very ambitious. And so how do you kind of make it all work? You mentioned your scrap metal business, then Proma Investments, then you've got Global Multi-Connect, and you have I think you have another one in there, Invest One.
Yeah, we have Invest One, and then we have a trucking company, C&T Pacific, and obviously Cornerstone of Hope, and we do serve at our local church, Chapel of Change. I believe the way we make this happen is through systems and structures, right? Through policy and procedures, having a clear vision of what we're trying to accomplish, great relationships and partnerships of people that identify themselves with what we're doing in each field, and just having a perspective that everything's doable.
And how do you go about kind of generating more business for each of these entities? Do you find yourself that God is sending you the right connections, the right customers, the right clients?
Yes, I think it honestly is gonna sound very, 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 very probably like the right answer to say, and very religious, but it comes down to prayer and seeking. I think if you want to do something significant, and you lack certain qualities, partner with God. Yeah. And the way you partner with God is by finding a way in which the kingdom of God can be better through what you're going to do. And I believe that's what we've done. We're praying, God, at the end of the day, we need this, not because, and don't get me wrong, I like having a good life. I like having a nice home. I love cars, right?
Yep, me too.
But at the end of the day, it goes beyond that, right? Yeah. Our biggest, or what drives us and wakes us up every morning, and I dare to say for the past 6 to 8 months, is that having that clear purpose, which is Cornerstone of Hope, that we can literally have a global impact in the next 10 to 20 years through the mercy and grace of God, right?